A very good morning to one and all. I welcome all the UG students, final year MBBS students of Stanley Medical College for the first webinar class on orthopedics. At the onset, I thank our HOD, Professor Tolkapian sir, who gave us this idea and who wanted us to impart knowledge and the continued medical education to all our students. In view of COVID-19, we were not able to take regular classes. So we have started this session. And I also thank our Alembic friends who made this webinar possible by lending their technical support. So now let's go into today's topic. Students, today we are going to deal about pediatric fractures and management. So before going into the topic, I always say one thing, that whenever we are going to learn about something, it is very important for us to understand what is the magnitude of this issue that we are going to lead about. So considering in our country, about 40% of our population are pediatric, and 15% of all the injuries that a child suffers usually results in fractures. And 50% of boys and 25% of girls are expected to have a fracture in the childhood. So pediatric fractures is one important thing that you should always keep in mind, and this is one common thing that even you can see or experience, or you see children's in your OPD or in your future practice also. You all been known with this famous quote, which every senior resident to professor of pediatrics will say: a child is not a miniature of an adult, and they have their specific issues and problems. Same way, a pediatric bone is not a miniature of adult bone. They have a specific properties and specific things which makes them important and very different from that of adult bone. For example, in an adult bone, what you see is a joint cartilage, a metaphyseal region, and a diaphyseal region. Whereas in child, you have a growth cartilage, epiphysis, the growth plate or the physis will be there. Then comes the metaphysis and diaphysis. In epiphysis, what initially you have is a cartilage. Later, secondary ossification center develop, which slowly ossifies, and then it becomes an adult bone. So all these things plays an important role, and it makes pediatric fractures much different from that of the adult fractures. So whatever you learn, first we have to understand what is the anatomical difference between a pediatric and an adult bone. So this pediatric fracture is dealt separately because already you have completed classes on general fractures and managements and splint. So now it will be ideal for you to understand about pediatric fractures separately. First, what you have to see is the joint cartilage. You have a very thick joint cartilage. So as I told, this thick cartilage is necessary for longitudinal growth of the child, and thick periosteum helps in improving the thickness of the bone. So these two things are specific. And what you see inside the bone is you have more cancellous bone than that of a cortical bone, and collagen is more compared to that of the calcium. So these are specific for pediatric bone. And as I told, growth plate or physis is specific. And the other important thing is the ligaments are usually stronger than that of the bone. So in pediatric, usually the bone fractures before the ligament fails. Whereas in case of adults, usually the ligaments fail and bones are much stronger. So this is one important thing that you have to understand. So what is importance of each thing will be dealt now. For example, as I told, the cartilage is more in pediatric population than that of the adult. So in this image you can see, like, cartilages are not usually seen in x-rays. So here you see that there is only a small fracture, but actually there will be a huge large chunk of fracture that happened. And because you see that this is a very innocuous and you may not treat it, but then this entire cartilage part is stripped off, or it is fractured. So when it heals, it usually heals with a very big deformity. So that is one thing. So always we tend to underestimate the size of the articular cartilage. Then when coming into the periosteum, you know, periosteum has blood vessels and it supplies, and it is a very metabolically active part, and blood supply to the bone is primarily by this periosteum. So whenever there is a fracture in pediatric population, because of this thick periosteum, you have more callus formation, which leads to a rapid union, and remodeling is also better in children compared to that of the adults. And the other important thing is, usually whenever being the periosteum is being thick, whenever there is a fracture, sometimes the periosteum on one side remains intact, which actually has a hinge effect and also helps us in reduction of the fractures. Pediatric bone is, as I told, is less dense. It is more porous. This is mainly because the Hawaiian canals are more in pediatric population than in that of the adult population. Because of this, there is the biomechanical properties of the pediatric bone is different from that of the adults. If they are having doubts, you can unmute their audio. They can ask their doubts. Few people are raising hands. You can unmute their audios. And because there is because of these changes, what biomechanically the problem happens is, the pediatric bone has low bending strength. So the strain on the bone is more. It has a low modulus of elasticity. So it can absorb greater energy before a fracture happens. And because of increased porosity, what happens is the fracture cannot propagate to a long distances. Hence, there is comminuted fractures are less in pediatric bone than that of the adult bone. Next, coming out to the fracture patterns, there are few specific fracture patterns for pediatric population which you have to know. Okay. First, in infants, the weakest points are usually the diaphysis, because the epiphysis and metaphysis are protected by joint cartilage. Usually the fracture usually doesn't happen in that area. But so the diaphyseal fractures are more common. Whereas in children, what you see is the metaphyseal fractures. This is because of increased blood supply to that area, which causes the metaphyseal fractures. Whereas in adolescents, epiphyseal fractures are more common. As you see, as the age increases, the rate of fracture as well as the rate of physeal injuries also increases. And boys are more affected than the girls. Upper limb fractures are more common in children compared to that of the lower limb fractures. So coming up to the specific fracture patterns, the first thing that you have to understand is the plastic deformation. What actually happens is that there is a microscopic failure in the convex side or the tensile side of the bone, which actually causes an angulation. This angulation is beyond the elastic limit of the bone. So there will be a permanent angulation that happens. So this is how it usually happens, the normal contour of the bone, and because of plastic deformation, there is a deformity. There is no fracture which is seen visibly, and it usually happens in long bones, long and thin bones like ulna and fibula. Whenever the bending is more than 20 degrees, the correction usually does not happen, and you need to correct it by close reduction. Here you can see that ulna being a straight bone, there is an angulation is seen. Same way in the lateral view also you can see the angulation. Whenever you are not able to confirm if there is any plastic deformation is not there, it's always better to take the opposite side to understand if there is any deformity is there or not. Here you can see the bone is relatively straight, and in this X-ray you can see there is a bending of the bone, which makes us to understand that there is a plastic deformation happening. This usually needs a close reduction and a cast application. The other important fracture that you have to understand is a torus fracture or a buccal fracture. So what usually happens is that this is because of a compressive failure of the bone, and it usually happens at the junction of metaphysis and diaphysis, and it usually happens in distal radius. So here, as I told, there is a buckling of the bone, and in X-rays you can see there is a buckling seen both in the AP and in the lateral view. Basically, this fractures heals, and it usually needs 3 to 4 weeks of immobilization for these kind of fractures. The other important thing is a green stick fracture, which is very peculiar to the pediatric population. What happens is there is a bending of the bone that happens in the convex side. A fracture happens, which is basically a unicortical breach, and it does not propagate to the opposite side, or it does not have the force to break the opposite side, but the opposite side undergoes a plastic deformation. Okay, so here you can see there is a fracture in the tensile side. There is no fracture in the concave side, but you can see there is a plastic deformation that is happening. So this is called as green stick fracture, because this is how a like whenever you break a green stick, this is how it happens. Like it breaks on one side and the other side is usually intact, but there is a plastic deformation happening. Okay, so what is advised whenever you see this kind of fracture is, the first thing is you have to complete the fracture here, and then you have to reduce it. Then only you can get a good opposition and reduction. Otherwise, you might end up in deformity. So you have to literally do like bone setters, break the bone, correct the deformity, and put plasters. So other fractures like complete fractures would have been already dealt in your previous fractures. So even children gets this kind of complete fracture like a spiral or a transverse or a oblique fracture. So now we have dealt about the diaphyseal fractures in children. The other pattern of injury which is very important is the physeal injuries. This is important because physis is there only in children, and it occurs about 25% of all fractures that the children suffer are because of physeal injury. And as you all know, physeal injuries are more common, just like other pediatric fracture. The upper limb is more common, and distal radial physis is the most commonly affected joint. Okay, and because the physis is the growth part, what is good thing is that these heal well and it heals rapidly. But what is bad about this physeal injuries is that because this is the growing part of the bone, whenever there is some permanent damage that happens in this physis, this can lead to an angular deformity or a limb length discrepancy, and this may finally lead to a joint incongruity. Okay, the physis responds both to compressive injuries as well as distraction injuries. To understand physis better, you have to first understand the zones in the physis. There is a zone called a germinal zone and a hypertrophic zone, where usually the calcification happens. So I have just showed this picture to make you understand better. So this is a distal radius, distal end of the radius. Here you have the epiphysis and then the metaphysis. When you try to zoom in the physis, what you see is the reserve zone, which is towards the epiphysis, and slowly there is a proliferative on the zone of maturation, then there is degradation, and finally provisional calcification that is there. And here is the metaphysis. So whenever there is a fracture happening, this fracture usually happens at the level of hypertrophic zone because this is the weak zone. But this fracture can propagate either upwards or it can go downwards. Whenever it goes upwards into the epiphysis, it affects the reserve zone. So these fractures tend to cause more complication than those which goes into the zone of provisional calcification and into the metaphysis. So this is the basic of the epiphyseal injuries. So this is given by a classification called as Salter and Harris classification. There are about 5 types which was initially described by Salter and Harris. Now this classification has been improved, which is beyond undergraduate level. So for your level, it is always better to learn about this classification. It is just 5 important types. The first type is a fracture line through the physis only. That is, it happens only in the hypertrophic zone. So as I told, because it is happening only in the hypertrophic zone, the chance of growth disturbance is very less, and usually it heals much better. And close reduction or cast application is mostly needed in this kind of fracture. Next is the type 2 fracture, where the fracture happens at the physeal region and the fracture line extends into the metaphysis. As you know that if you're going through the zone of provisional calcification, so the growth disturbance is usually very less. And this is the most common type of physeal injury that you always see. The third is the fracture in which there is a fracture that is happening in the physeal region and it is extending into the epiphysis. And this is going through the germinal layer. So there will be a variable growth disturbance. As this fracture line goes into the joint, an anatomic reduction is necessary. Coming into the fourth type, in which there is a fracture which is going through the metaphysis, physis, and into the epiphysis. What is the problem with this fracture is, because it is a through and through fracture, there is an increased risk of physeal bar formation, which can affect the growth of the child. The other is the fifth is the crush injury. This is mainly because of the compressive forces that is happening, and it is very difficult to actually identify this kind of fractures. And because it is the entire physis is crushed, this is a very bad injury, and the growth disturbance is very high in this kind of injuries. So, have just shown the X-rays of various types to make you understand better. So this is type 1. There is a physeal separation that is present. Type 2, in which extending into the metaphysis from the physis. And this is a type 3, in which of a fracture coming from the metaphysis getting into the epiphysis. A type 4 fracture where the fracture line extends from the metaphysis, goes through the physis and into the epiphysis of the joint. And this is important because this is very difficult to identify. You can see here the compressive or the fifth type, where you can see there is some joint space is visible here, whereas the physis is visible. Now coming into the fracture remodeling. So the remodeling capacity of the children is much better when compared to that of the adults. This is very important because when we are trying to going in for reduction in adults, we have to aim for a perfect anatomical reduction. Whereas if there is a fracture in children, we can accept to an extent the deformity. So what are those things that we can accept in children is, if the age is very less, the younger children have a greater potential for remodeling compared to that of the older children. And location of the fractures. Usually the fracture that is happening adjacent to the physis undergo a better amount of remodeling compared to that of the fracture that is away from the physis. So remodeling is the capacity of a bone, a malunited bone, to come back into the normal position. For those who don't know what is remodeling. And degree of deformity. Usually, if there is a deformity that is happening at the plane of the joint, for example, in elbow joint, the plane of the joint is flexion and extension. So whenever there is a angulation that is happening anteroposteriorly, usually it remodels better. Whereas if it is not happening in the plane of the deformity, like a mediolateral angulation, that may result in the deformity. And what you see is the healing is mostly rapid in children when compared to that of the adults. The other important thing that you have to understand is overgrowth of bone. Because of hyperemia and increased blood supply, what happens is that the long bones tend to overgrow whenever there is a fracture, which is more common in young children like 6 months to 1 year, less than 10 years, than the children who are more than 10 years. Why it is important? Because whenever you see there is a shortening of bone, we can accept in young children when compared to that of the older children. So as I told, type 5 physeal injuries or other physeal injury, what usually happens is that there can be a development of a bony spar, which leads, because there is a growth in growth rate, one part of the growth is affected and other part the growth usually happens. This can lead to progressive deformities, which could be either an angular deformity, or it could be, if the entire physis is affected, it could be a shortening of bone. Both can happen, and it all depends upon two things. One, the magnitude. The magnitude of deformity is mainly on amount of physis which is involved and amount of growth which is remaining. So both those things dictate the magnitude of the deformity. So now, understanding the different fracture patterns and fractures in children, we will now go into the history and clinical examination in children with fractures. So the history part is very important compared to that of the examination part, because the examination part is somewhat similar to that of the adult fractures, whereas history, it is little bit different, because a children or a young child may not communicate with you. So few important things that you have to ask your the caregiver for identifying the fractures. First, if it is a lower limb injury, if the child refuses to wear weight, it is an indirect evidence that there is some infection, inflammation, or a trauma that has happened, and we have to examine them. And usually a pseudo paralysis, or the child refuses to move the affected part. So these, whereas if the child may move the other upper limb normally, whereas this upper limb the child may not move. So all these things gives us an idea that as per this specific part has been injured, and usually the child will be irritable and feeding will be less. So failure to feeding can happen. So all this will give us an idea that there is some problem with this child. With that, we have to identify the location, either it is a particular part or it is a larger part it is involved. Then we have to ask the other usual questions like the onset, quality of pain, and duration of pain, any aggravating or relieving factor. The other important thing is always check for neurovascular compromise if it is there or not. Like if it is a supracondyle or humerus fracture, always check for pulses and see if there is any nerve injury is there, weakness is there or not. So that clinical examination is very, very important, because neurovascular injuries will dictate whether we need to operate or not to operate. Coming to the investigation, the prime investigation that you will take in case of fractures is X-rays. And always remember the rule of two. Always take two views whenever you are taking a fracture, whenever you are evaluating a fracture, and two joints. That is, whenever there is a diaphyseal fracture, always make sure that the upper and the lower joints are visible. And in children, when, as I told, like plastic deformation or a mild fracture can sometimes be missed out. So always take the opposite limb for comparison to understand if this is normal or if it is something abnormal. So these three things is important. Apart from that, it is always better to take two different times X-rays, like before reduction and after reduction, or after. So that will help us to understand the deformity is corrected or not. And two different orthopedicians' opinion can also be obtained, because sometimes it is very easy to miss out a physeal injury or a cartilaginous injury, which we might think that it is a very small injury, but it could be a very large injury. So whenever this problems happening, the other investigations helps us to understand much better things. So here I have just purely told you, like this is the angulation deformity, this is the translation deformity. So always look for the short note is LA or C for length. Any angulation is there, and rotational deformity is there or not. So that's how we usually see. So rotational deformities we can always identify by looking at the girth of the bone. For example, when you see that the girth of the bone is more in one part and the girth of the bone is very much reduced in the other part, it means that there is some rotation that has happened in the bone. So that will help you to identify there is any rotational deformity or not. So identifying this deformity will help us to decide whether we need to go in what kind of appropriate management. Next, the CT scan. Whenever you see a joint injury and you want to delineate the amount of joint congruity involved or other things, or if it is a comminuted fracture, CT scans will help. And as you know that pediatric population, the cartilage part is the major part and the bony part is less. In case of physeal, epiphyseal injuries, MRI also plays an important role in identifying the extent of the injury. There is one more specific investigation that we can do. One, it is called as arthrogram. This is done by injecting the dye inside the joint and then taking the X-rays. By injecting the dye usually fills up the joint space, and then it helps us to delineate the cartilage size. So that is also one important investigation that we can do if the MRI is not available in a particular setup. So that will help us to delineate the fractures. After understanding the investigation, let us go into the treatment part. So whenever treatment, there are two important injuries that you have to identify. One is the closed injuries and other is the open injury. I think open fractures has already been dealt to you. So same like adult, if there is an open injury, first, if depending upon the type of the open injury that is present, we have to go for debridement of the involved part, and then we can provisionally immobilize either with a slab or an X-fix. Whereas in case of closed injuries, we treat conservatively by closed reduction and slab or cross immobilization. And in case of if it is not amenable to closed reduction, then we can go in for an open reduction and internal fixation of the fractures. So there are specific indications for an operative management in children, which you have to understand. They are displaced intra-articular fractures, especially Salter Harris type 3 and 4, needs a proper reduction and fixation. And if it is there in case of a vascular injury, a neurovascular injury, or in case of a compartment syndrome, then we need to operate on this child. And if we are not able to achieve a proper closed reduction, either because of soft tissue interposition or any other thing, then we need to go in for an open reduction and fixation of these fractures. So this pictorial diagram will help you to understand like what kind of fractures usually need operative management in case of an infant, child and adolescent. So usually in infants, the injuries around the elbow and around the hip joint may require operative fixation, whereas when it comes to children, or usually the injuries around the joints may need the fixation, and diaphyseal fractures can be treated conservatively or operatively. And in case of adolescent, it is more or like an adult fracture, and this has to be treated most oftenly by fixate operative procedures. So, is there any method that by which we can decide on whether by close reduction and cost application we can manage it? Basically, what you have to understand is, as I already told, if the child age is very less, their remodeling capacity is much better. Hence, a younger child we can accept to an extent angulation, also shortening, especially when the child is less than 6 years. We can accept up to 1 centimeter to 2 centimeter shortening in case of femur, and a 15-degree angulation is acceptable. But usually rotations are not acceptable, or a minimal rotation of less than 5 degrees is acceptable. When it is coming to children of age group 6 to 10 years, less than 10 degree of angulations are usually acceptable, and end-to-end opposition is usually preferred. When it comes to patients who are more than 12 years, basically they are treated like adults, and no rotatory or angulatory deformities are acceptable. So how you can fix these fractures? In children, basically we fix it with K-wires, and especially in case of metaphyseal fracture. If the K-wires has to pass through the physis, smooth K-wires are preferred than compared to that of a threaded K-wires. In case of diaphyseal fractures, we we can be managed with an intramedullary wires or elastic nails, which is usually called as TENS, or titanium elastic nails, are used in case of diaphyseal fractures of femur or tibia. And in case of epiphyseal injuries, type 3 or type 4, Salter and Harris, we usually fix it with screws. And we should make sure that these screws do not penetrate the physis. Case of multiple injury, in case of adolescent children, we can fix it with plates. But problem with open reduction and plate fixation is, in younger children, usually they might need a second surgery for removal of these plates. So that's why this plate fixation is usually we try to avoid in children. Intramedullary device is also a very good device, intramedullary nailing, which can be used for adolescent children. The problem is, if it intramedullary nail usually passes through the physis, and it can cause disturbances in the growth. In case of open fractures, we can always fix with a external fixator or a limb reconstruction system. So both can be used for managing a case of open fractures. Sometimes few complicated fractures might need one or more methods of fixation. Coming into the complications, so malunion is a common complication that can happen, but it is usually not a problem, because as you know that the remodeling capacity of the children is more. But whenever the plane of deformity is not is opposite to that of the plane of the joint, like cubitus varus deformity, like medial lateral angular deformity in case of supracondylar fracture, can lead to deformity like cubitus varus, which might need a surgery in future. Non-unions are usually rare, except in case of few fractures like a lateral condyle fracture of humerus, where usually the soft tissue goes in between the fracture end, which does not allow the fracture to unite. Growth disturbance is more common, especially in case of physeal injuries and epiphyseal damage, which can lead to formation of physeal bars. And vascular complications like Volkmann's ischemia because of tight cast can also happen, which leads to permanent contractures. Infections are usually rare or it is less in children. There are few specific injuries or fractures that you have to know whenever you are coming into pediatric fracture. One is the non-accidental injury, which is initially considered to be more common in Western population. But what we see is nowadays there is an increase in our population also. One among them is a battered baby syndrome. So this has to be a radiological diagnosis can be made in case of battered baby syndrome. What you see is there is a lot of soft tissue injuries, bruising usually seen, and the mechanism of injury and the fracture pattern is totally different. Or a small fracture can, a small mechanism of injury causing a bigger fractures will help you to understand that it is mainly, it can be a battered baby syndrome. And so you can see multiple rib fractures, which is seen in case of battered baby syndrome. And what you see is the delay, there is a delay in the attention of treatment in these children, and multiple fractures usually seen in these children in various stages of healing. This also tells us to say that this is basically because of battered baby syndrome. And what you see is small, this is called as a corners fracture, which happens because of twisting of the child. The end of the epiphysis, or basically a type 2 Salter Harris happens in these children because of twisting injury, which is also a feature of battered baby syndrome. There are other reasons for pathological fractures which you have to keep in mind, because whenever you are dealing with these fractures, the first thing is you have to treat the pathology, the pathological condition, so that the fracture heals much better, and you can also avoid the recurrence of fracture. So one among that is rickets, osteomyelitis, uh, mineral deficiencies like copper deficiency, tumors like simple or aneurysmal bone cysts can also cause pathological fractures. Osteomalacia can cause pathological fracture. Certain diseases like Paget's disease can cause fractures in these children. And there is a specific condition called as osteogenesis imperfecta, in which the bone is very weak and the child has repeated chances of getting fractures for very small injuries. So these are the pathological fractures that you have to keep in mind, and this has to be treated appropriately. I thank everyone for the patient listening. I think now you can unmute the audios of the participants, and participants can now participate and they can ask any questions if they have. You can type your doubts. You can type your doubts.
Can ask the questions. Before that, you need to unmute your audio. Can ask the questions. Otherwise, other option is you can type the questions in the chat box.
So Volkmann's ischemia. So this is one condition. There is a question like, please tell about Volkmann's ischemia. Volkmann's ischemia usually happens. It is a type of compartment syndrome. Like there is a loss of blood supply, which causes a necrosis of the muscles and necrosis of the muscles and leads to permanent contraction. What usually happens is this is more common in upper limb trauma, especially in case of forearm fractures or a supracondylar humerus fracture. This basically happens because of tight casting procedures. So whenever you cast or you do put slab, it's always better to put slab in case of acute injury, because what happens is you can give some amount of swelling to subside, then you can convert to cast. But whenever you put a tight cast, it becomes like a compartment, and the blood supply is usually lost to the muscles, which leads to a aseptic necrosis of the muscles, and which leads to permanent deformities. And that is what is Hoffman's ischemic contraction. This is more common in children. What usually happens is, according to the affected compartments, usually the superficial flexor compartment or the deep flexor compartment is affected, and the muscles gets necrosed, which leads to a deformity of similar to that of hyperextension of the metacarpals and flexion of the uh, at the phalangeal joints. The other is the other question: what is the commonest fracture in brittle bone disease? So usually femur is most commonly fractured bone in case of brittle bone disease or the osteogenesis imperfecta. Osteogenesis imperfecta per se as a array of there is about 6 to 7 types over there. So in case of mild, the what you see is the long bone getting fractured, especially the femur. Whereas in case of children with severe deformity, they usually have fractures throughout all bones. All long bones are usually involved. But when it comes to commonest bone, it is femur. So does fracture in brittle bone require surgical repair or conservative management? So it basically what you see in osteogenesis imperfecta is that even though it fractures easily, the healing is much better, or it is equivocal to that of the normal population. So in case of acute fracture, basically we treat it conservatively. But in case of fractures that has healed in malunion, we need to do surgery to correct the malunion. So those things might need surgery. But for fracture per se, if the angulation is acceptable, age is acceptable, just like a general population, if other criteria are in acceptable limits, we can manage it conservatively. There is one more question, like, does pediatric fracture cause a increase in frequency of fracture in adults at same location? It's very unlikely, because whenever there is a pediatric population fracture in younger children, like it remodels so beautifully that it becomes very difficult even to say after 3 or 4 years the bone becomes so normal and it heals without any scar or anything. It doesn't happen. But whenever you get a fracture happening at an adolescent age group, the healing is little bit delayed. And if there is a feature of delayed healing, or if there is any chance of infection, then there is an increased risk of fracture in those areas in adult. So that can happen because of infection, or if it is not healing properly. But if it heals properly, or if it is the children at a younger age group, basically there is no difference. Okay, there is one more question, very good question that you have to understand. What is the difference between a cast and a slab? So if you apply a POP, plaster of Paris, in circumferential, throughout, like covering the entire circumference of a limb, then it is called as casting. If you are giving a partial support, then it is called a slab, like a posterior support in case of an upper limb fracture or lower limb fracture. What is the difference is that whenever you apply slab, there are the advantage is that you are not covering the entire circumference. So if there is any swelling, there is the swelling, it can accommodate little bit of swelling. The cotton bandages can accommodate a little bit of swelling. So in case of acute injury, it is very helpful, because if you apply cast in case of acute injury, that can lead to compartment syndrome or Hoffmann ischemic contraction. Whereas the advantage of cast is that the disadvantage of slab is that whenever, because this is covering only a part of circumference of the limb, there is a chance of losing the reduction and then development of the deformity. That can happen. So that is the disadvantage of slab, which is overcome by cast. So if you apply snug fitting cast, usually and the fracture reduction does not fail, and malunion is very less. So that is the difference. Any more questions? So if there are no more questions, I think we can wind up the session.